You've already seen how SwiftUI's @state property wrapper lets us work with local value types, and how @observedObject lets us work with shareable reference types. Well, there's a third option called @binding, which lets us connect an @state property of one view to some underlying model data. Think about it. When we create a toggle switch, we send in some sort of Boolean property that can be changed, like this. @state private var remember me equals false. Toggle is on $remember me. Text remember me. So the toggle needs to change our Boolean when the user interacts with it. But how does it remember what value it should change? That's where @binding comes in. It lets us create a mutable value in a view that actually points to some other value from elsewhere. In the case of toggle, the switch changes its own local binding to a Boolean, but behind the scenes, that's actually manipulating the @state property in our view. This makes @binding extremely important for whenever we want to create a custom UI component. At their core, UI components are just SwiftUI views like everything else, but @binding is what sets them apart. While they might have their own local @state properties, they also expose @binding properties that let them interface directly with other views. To demonstrate this, we're going to create a new kind of button, one that stays down when pressed. Our basic implementation will all be stuff you've seen before: a button with some padding, a linear gradient for the background, a capsule clip shape, and so on. So add this to content-view.swift now. Struct push button conforms to view. Let title string. @state var is on bool. Var on colors equals array of color.red, color.yellow. Var off colors equals an array of color white 0.6 and color white 0.4. Var body some view. Button title, and when it's tapped, self.isOn.toggle. We'll add some padding. For the background, I'll give it a linear gradient. With the colors depending if we're on or off. From the start point to the top, to the end point being the bottom. White foreground color. Capsule clip shape, and a shadow again depending if we're on or off. The only vaguely interesting thing in there is that I use properties for the two gradient colors so they can be customized by whatever creates the button. We can now create one of those buttons as part of our main user interface, like this. @state private var remember me equals false. vstack push button title remember me is on remember me. And for the text, it'll either be on or off depending on the value of our Boolean. So as you can see, that has a text view below the button so we can track how the state of the button works. Try running your code and see what you think. What you'll find is that tapping the button does indeed affect the way it appears. But our text view doesn't reflect that change. It always says off. Clearly, something is changing, because the button's appearance changes when it's pressed. But that change isn't being reflected in content view. What's happening here is that we've defined a one-way flow of data. Content view has its remember me Boolean, which gets used to create a push button. The button has an initial value provided by the content view. However, once a button was created, it takes over control of the value. It toggles the isOn property between true or false internally to the button, but doesn't pass that change back on to content view. This is a problem, so we now have two sources of truth. Content view is storing one value, and push button another. Fortunately, this is where @binding comes in. It allows us to create a two-way connection between push button and whatever is using it, so that when one value changes, the other does too. To switch over to @binding, we have to make just two changes. First, in push button, change its isOn property to be @binding rather than @state. And second, in content view, change the way we create the button to this. $remember me. So we're just adding a $sign before remember me. We're passing in the binding itself, not the boolean inside it. Now run the code again, and you'll find that everything works as expected. Toggling the button now correctly updates the text view as well. This is the power of binding. As far as the button's concerned, it's just toggling a boolean. It has no idea that something else is monitoring that boolean and acting upon changes.